Hey guys, let's do yet another example for mean, median, and mode. And this is in a format that's very similar to your test, so make sure you are paying attention and you can review this at any time. All right, so let's begin with mean. Hopefully by now you understand that mean is the average and it is found by taking the sum of the numbers. That means adding them all together. That means adding them all together. Then dividing by how many numbers are in the set. All right, so we take the sum of all the numbers, then we divide by the number of values in the set. All right, so let's go ahead and do that with these values. So you can just list them as they are: 6 plus 5 plus 8 plus 7 plus 2 plus 8 plus 5 plus 7 plus 8 plus 4. And let's make sure we have all the values. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 9, 10. Okay, we do have 10. And then we are going to first add all of those up. And I already did the math, and it's 60. And then we're going to divide by how many values are in the set. Like I said, I counted them, and it said 10. And also, the beginning here says Mrs. Stroh surveys 10 of her students. So we divide by 10. And of course, 60 divided by 10 is just going to give us 6. So our average, or mean, would be 6. And you always want to check this for to see if it's reasonable. So does it make sense that in between this set of students, the average is 6. This set ranges from 2 to 8, so it does make sense that 6 is somewhere in between. So 6 would be our mean, okay? A lot of people make the mistake of doing that first step, finding the sum and adding all the numbers, but then they don't divide. So in this case, if we checked our work and said, okay, 60, does that make sense? Hopefully you would be able to check that that would not make sense if your average of numbers ranging from 2 to 8 was 60. Okay, so check for reasonable. Check if it's reasonable. All right, our next one is median. And the way I told you guys to remember this is not small, not large, but medium, right in the middle. Sounds like median. So this is the middle value in a set. But this is an important part. When data is ordered. If it's not ordered, that's not going to be your median. That's going to be some random number in the middle. So make sure your data is first ordered. So let's go ahead and look at these numbers above in order. So we have 2. We have, let's see, 4, I believe is next. We have 2 5s that I see. We have a 6 that I see. 7, 7, and it looks like 3 8s. All right, so you have 2 scenarios for median. Anytime you have an even number in your set, which we do right now, you're going to end up with 2 in the middle. That does not mean you have 2 medians. That means you have 2 numbers that you're going to need to find the median of. And the way you're going to do that, luckily we just did an example, is by finding the mean of those 2 middle numbers. So in this case, you can see I went 4 from each side. You have to go an even number from each side since it's in the middle. And my 2 middle numbers are 6 and 7, and I need to find what's in between those 2 numbers. And the way I do that, just like I said, is you take the average. So you're going to add 6 plus 7. We get 13. And then you're going to divide by how many there are. So we're only dividing by 2 since we're only talking about those 2 numbers. And our answer would give us 6.5. You ask yourself if that makes sense. Yes, first of all, it makes sense that 6.5 is in between 6 and 7. And second of all, it makes sense that that would be the center of a set ranging from 2 to 8. All right, very last one is mode. The easiest one in my opinion. This is the value that occurs the most. Not to be confused with the highest value. This is the value that occurs the most frequently. That means it happens more than all of the other numbers in the set. So the thing about mode is you can have one. So you can have only one, more than one, or none. So these are all options for mode. You can have only one, you could have more than one, or you can have none. It just depends on the set. And in this case, let's look at our ordered list for a median and see which numbers occur the most. So I have 5 occurs twice, 7 occurs twice, and 8 occurs 3 times. So some people think it's the value that occurs more than once. That's not always true. It's the one that occurs the most. In this case, 8 occurs 3 times. That's more than the 2 times that 5 and 7 occur. So our mode here would be 8. And once again, mean, median, and mode are all measures of center. So you always want to check and make sure they fall within your data. If they're smaller than your smallest value in your set or bigger than your biggest value in your set, you know you made a mistake somewhere. Here my data ranges from 2 to 8, so it makes sense that my mode would be 8 since that's still within the set. Okay, number 1 also asks you to create a dot plot for this data, so I wanted to go ahead and demonstrate that as well. So in order to create a dot plot, the first thing we have to do is create a scale. So that's a number line at the bottom, and we want to choose what we want that to go by. So with the dot plot, you always need to take into account your lowest value. In this case, it's 2. That's our lowest or our minimum value. And our highest value would be 8. So this scale has to range from 2 to 8. Don't forget any numbers. So 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. All right, we have all of the numbers. Be really careful with the scale. Some people skip the values that aren't in their set, but on the scale, we always have to include all of them. Okay, so all we're gonna do now is we're gonna go ahead and place one dot to represent the piece of data, and we're gonna place it wherever it is on the number line. So I'm gonna start here on the first one with 6. So I'm gonna cross it off, and then I'm gonna put a little dot at 6. Next, I'm gonna go to 5 and put a dot on 5. The next value is 8, so I'm gonna put a dot on 8. 7, I'm gonna put a dot on 7. 2, I'm gonna put a dot on 2. Another 8, so I'm gonna put a dot on 8, another one right on top. 5, so I'm gonna put another one right on top of 5. Another 7 as well. Another 8, and a 4. All right, so in this case, you can see how I crossed them all off. All of my data was accounted for. So there's the dot plot to start. And usually with dot plot, we'll be asked to identify a few things. So one of those things is the peak. And the peak is the same as the mode. It's the value that occurs the most. Value, I should say, or values that occur the most. So in this case, we already knew from that previous slide which one was our mode. And we call it a peak in a dot plot because it's the highest point, just like a mountain peak. So in this case, our peak would also be 8. Our next key term would be a cluster. And a cluster is an interval with a large amount of data. So that's basically an area on your graph where it seems like there's a lot of data points. So in this case, cluster is one that's a little bit up for interpretation. So I would take a few answers here. If someone said between 7 and 8 was a cluster, I would say that's acceptable. If someone went to the lengths of saying all the way from 4 to 8 is a cluster, I would also take that as acceptable. Any part of, I'm not sure why it's doing that, any part of this data on the right side with that majority of data right there, I would take as an answer for cluster. But it's just an area where the majority of data lies. So if you said it was over at 2, I probably would disagree. All right, and the very last one is a gap, just like it sounds. It is an area with no data. So just like a gap in your teeth, there's nothing there. You would go to your graph and see if there's any area with no data. In this case, we just have 1 point missing. 3 would be the gap, since there's no point at 3.